Hello and welcome to a new episode of Talking Snooker with Phil Haig and Nick Metcalf. Once again, talking about the game we all love.
We are indeed in so much going on. It feels like an awful long time since we've been with you, since the start of the UK Championship. Lots stuck out there. But first, some more serious news.
Very much so, Phil. Yeah, we've had an absolutely brilliant UK Championship. As you say, it does feel like a long time since we were last on air. So much to reflect on from events in York, which of course culminated in a second UK title for Judd Trump. We will talk about the tournament at length, of course, coming up. But we must first reflect on the very sad news that Terry Griffiths has died at the age of 77. Terry Griffiths will go down as one of snooker's most celebrated and popular champions. A former coal miner, bus conductor, postman, and insurance salesman, Griffiths had significant success on the amateur circuit, but it wasn't until he was aged 30, with the game finally becoming a major television sport, that he turned professional in 1978. And amazingly, the following year, he became world champion. Griffiths beat Bernard Bennett and Jim Meadowcroft to qualify for the tournament, and he then beat Perry Manns and Alex Higgins at the Crucible before a marathon 1917 win over Eddie Charlton in the semi-finals. After that, he delivered one of snooker's most memorable ever lines, saying to the BBC's David Vine, "I'm in the final now, you know." And in that 1979 final, he beat Dennis Taylor 24-16. Those were the early days of the BBC covering the tournament in full, and Griffiths became a household face and name overnight. Big success followed for Griffiths in the years to come. He won the Masters in 1980, beating Higgins 9-5 in the final at the Wembley Conference Centre. He claimed the UK Championship title in 1982 at Preston's Guildhall, again beating Higgins in the final, this time 16-15 in an epic match. He won 3 Irish Masters titles in a row and a number of other tournaments, including the Classic in 1982, where he beat Steve Davis in the final, and the BBC's Pot Black in 1984. He reached the World Final again in Sheffield in 1988 and continued to be a top player throughout the 1990s before retiring after 2 decades as a pro in 1997. Griffith had also established himself as a fine television commentator, and after retiring from playing, also became a highly successful coach. He worked with a host of top players, including Stephen Hendry, Mark Williams, Mark Allen, Stephen Maguire, and Ding Junhui. He received an OBE for services to snooker in 2007 and remained a beloved snooker character into his 60s and 70s. Whenever Terry was around, you knew you were in the presence of snooker royalty. He had sadly been suffering with dementia in recent times and died on Sunday. It's the end of a profound era in this sport, and as you can imagine, tributes have been paid to Griffiths from all corners of the snooker world and far beyond. There's no question that the name Terry Griffiths will live on in this sport for generations to come. Frankly, Terry will forever be part of snooker folklore.
Yeah, that's all exactly true. Yeah, what a legendary figure in the game. And Nick mentioned a few of the tributes there. I've got a few of them here. I mean, there's really countless ones from players, fans, people within the game, but I've got a handful here from players who knew him. Stephen Hendry, words from him. What a great man, what a great player. A very funny man with a savagely dry sense of humour. He always told you straight what he thought, and his knowledge of the game was incredible. Mark Allen, who Nick mentioned, was coached by Terry. What a legend of a man who helped shape my career and life, both on and off the table. Absolutely heartbroken. He wasn't just a coach, he was family. Short words from Mark Williams, just said mentor, coach, friend, legend. Barry Hearn here, he posted a video on social media, said, he was the first player I ever promoted in terms of events. His Southern Area title against Sid Hood. It's nearly 50 years ago now. What a long time. But what a lovely man. I never had a bad day with him. He had a great sense of humour, Never wanted to travel anywhere outside of phonetically, sorry, really. And all he did was comb his hair, but we loved him. A wonderful, wonderful human being. He's somewhere safe now. He's had a very long illness, but we're thinking of him in a very special way because he's a very special man. One from Tepchire and New here, which stood out to me just because of the sort of breadth of players he worked with and sort of touched in his career. Just from Tepchire on Instagram, I once coached with him. It was an honour. R.I.P. Master Griffiths. And Anthony Hamilton, I spoke to today. Actually, I didn't even remember he'd worked with Terry, but I asked him for some memories of him. And Anthony told me all about their time working together. And this was part of it. There's a piece on Metro if you want to read more, but some lines from Anthony here. I haven't been on social media because I don't think I could put into words what a sound geezer he was. He was the best guy in snooker, I think. The most genuine guy, the best coach, amazing player, and the funniest geezer you'll ever meet in your life. It's a real loss, a massive loss, just the best guy. Someone who all the players could go to if they really needed someone's advice. He coached me for a few years and he was generally in your corner, like your dad would be. He was that into it, which meant the world for the players. It's nice when they're feeling every shot like you are. All the players really appreciated Terry, and he'll be missed because there's never going to be another Terry Griffiths in the world. So lovely words from Anthony there, and from all the players. And yeah, you can tell when all the sentiments are almost identical. Then you know it's all just everyone thought the same and held him in such high regard. And yeah, terribly sad news.
Very much terribly sad news. And I think what you hint at there, Phil, is what I've really noticed is it's both the snooker player and the person, and they're kind of both kind of loved and revered. He was such a nice, decent character. And I was so glad that so many people have talked about the humour because he was so funny and he kind of knew he was. He had that knowing thing that I love about people that are genuinely funny. It was dry humour, great quips, always had the right line, a sort of a great knowing way about it. And total humility, really. And that's come over time and time again, particularly, within the coaching in later years, a number of people, number of players saying it was then all about them. It wasn't, I was Terry Griffiths, I did this and that. You didn't really know about it. He just was focusing on his new sort of life. And I have to say, he had my favourite human quality in abundance. He was so gentle. I loved his gentleness. And I was telling you before we came on air, Phil, something came to my mind again in the last couple of days since the sad news about Terry dying. I remember quite a few years ago now, being backstage at the Crucible in that eating area, that sort of canteen area we all gather in. And funny enough, we were watching the television programme on the BBC, Talking Snooker. That name rings a bell, Phil. And Alistair McGowan was presenting it, and it was very nostalgic, actually, the programme. So people in there were in a pretty nostalgic mood. And I happened to be watching it on the sort of same table as 4 or 5 ladies that have worked at the Crucible for ever of the day, really, many years, in some cases, decades. And at one stage, I asked them who their favourite character in snooker was that they'd met at the Crucible over the years. And they met them all. They met them all and on numerous occasions. And the answer was quick and it was unequivocal. They said their favourite was Terry Griffiths. And I always distinctly remember one of the ladies saying, he's lovely. Always remember that. They said Terry would always chatted to them, usually at length, no airs and graces, just Terry, really, soft and gentle and delightful. And I thought that said a great amount, not just a special snooker player, but a smashing person too. And like so many of those stars, Phil, of that era, they had an aura. Now, aura's a hard word to describe in the dictionary, isn't it? It's more of a sort of feeling you get when people are around. When they walk in a room, there's Terry Griffiths. And he just oozed that. And it's a year and a time when we're losing a lot of those stars. And Terry represented lots of different eras, but I'm thinking 70s in my mind a lot. Won the title in 79. Of course, a few years ago, we sadly lost Doug Mountjoy earlier this year we lost Ray Reardon. These are sad times for everybody involved in snooker and indeed wider sport. But for Welsh snooker, Welsh sport, these are particularly sad time because there's such a love, profound love of snooker across Wales. And I'm sad to say, Phil, that they're losing so many of their favourite sons and all in recent times now.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, it's been a terrible year for deaths in snooker, really. You mentioned Ray there, and Clive Everton's gone. Mark Wildman, I know you're going to come too soon, but yeah, in Wales, yeah, it's going to be felt profoundly. Real superstar there, and everywhere in snooker, yeah, like you said, or is a funny one, isn't it? Because you sort of, if you had never heard of snooker and you saw him, you would just think it's sort of normal like older man. You know, he's always got that same sort of jacket. He looks very unassuming, but like I said, when he walked into a room, you knew Terry Griffiths was there. Um, I only had one real experience with him, and it was before I sort of was working in snooker as I am now. It was when I was out before and here when I was a student and spent time in a couple of tournaments with press officer for World Snooker, and he was getting me to do a few Q&As for the website. So just sat down with a couple of characters that were just knocking around at the UK Championship that year, and Terry was one of them. And so I had sort of 10, 15 minutes just chatting to him then, and that was the only time I spoke to him. But yeah, he was exactly as everyone's described him. Super friendly, so nice, really funny, um, and really generous with his time, and how pleasant he was to speak to when I was just, some nobody he'd never met who was a student. I was trying to dig that up, but I can't find it anywhere online. I can't find the recording, unfortunately, but I would have loved to have been able to. But yeah, my one of experience personally with Terry was exactly how everyone describes him, just wonderful man.
Yeah, exactly. Lovely words there from you. Just to say, was something else I remembered that one of my great pals in the business, Peter Carline, did one of the last general interviews, the last big newspaper interviews I remember from him actually, which must have been 5 or 6 years ago. And it's a really good read actually. It's in the Daily Mail from Peter, and it starts off with those words, I'm in the final now, and it's such a good read actually. Peter was messaging me in the last few days saying just, the same experience as you, how lovely he was to deal with, what a lovely man. And that comes over time and time again. So that's definitely, worth looking back and having a read on. Obviously, there's loads of memories. We say that about these stars. It's terribly sad to lose them, immensely sad. But in some senses, they live on because we have so many of these great videos out there, these great articles, and some of the footage of yesteryear. I mean, and that was, such a wonderful moment before our time. But even when you look back at it now and you see that, I think it must have been getting on for something like 2 in the morning when he beat Eddie Charlton, and you can just imagine the most immense scrap. We had a couple of big scraps at the UK we'll come to, Phil, but this was probably another level of that. Griffiths against Charlton, 1917. Can you imagine? We've seen footage of it now, but you never quite the same as living through it. Can you imagine watching it live? The tension, and then David Vine coming out to the floor, and the whole interview is actually brilliant. Terry's like, "Oh, that man," and just like that lovely sort of lilt of his, that beautiful voice, and then she looks at David. I'm in the final now, and it exemplified everything. I thought the humility of Terry, the sort of humour of Terry. It was just such a wonderful moment. I've often said, I think you can tell the history of snooker pretty well, and certainly that championship, that world championship, through the lines. Be it if it all happened in black and white, or he's beginning to annoy me. One that I like from more recent times, winner, winner, chicken dinner, when Stuart Bingham won the title. But that's right up there, that Griffiths line. And just what an achievement to win that world title in '79 as a qualifier. I mean, my goodness. And the Charlton match, the Eddie Charlton match was so long. He beat Higgins in the decider earlier in the tournament. All the matches pretty much were long. I mean, okay, 24-16 is a relatively comfortable winning the final to some extent, but, in the end, but that's still elements of scrapping there because it's a long, long, long match. So it was just a brilliant try. Then to follow it up with so much more, winning the Masters, winning the UK. And what was in my time was the '88 final. And I still remember him knocking the globe over. And that was just a lovely, funny moment during that final. And into the 90s, he had sort of still big wins. And what is a bit under, and even I didn't quite, I remembered it at the time, but it's one of those that it slips through the old brain when the years and decades go by. I'd almost sort of forgotten how top he still was in rankings terms when he retired. He was still right up there, and getting to latter stages of tournaments, very competitive, still winning matches at the Crucible to the end. So, and then to do it, again in sport in a different way with the coaching. And how many players look up to him, Phil? I mean, you speak to more players than I do. And even now they'll say, weren't they, that the Griff, we should say that's a lot of people will say the Griff. And they revere him. They'll say, the advice he gave. And it wasn't just, I think, about, I mean, I wasn't there any of them, but just the technique, or I'm sure it was a lot of that, but it was often seemed to be a lot of the head stuff that Terry would remember back in the day about keeping them together in crucial moments. And I think a lot of, from what I can gather from speaking to a lot of players myself over the years, a lot of it was sort of calming down the players, keeping them grounded. I mean, I can see you nodding your head. Is that your experience? He had a great way, I think, of keeping the temperature down type thing.
Yeah, it seems that some of the things, obviously, people don't go into huge detail about what coaches tell them, but what they have said sound very simple. It was just, relax, I believe in you, which, anyone could say. But I think the simple words are coming from someone of his stature, and just his delivery, which means so much, don't they? And people in Czech, and obviously he could do a lot more than that. He could do every side of the coaching game, but yeah, just a very calming, encouraging presence that made people believe in themselves a bit more. Um, yeah, and you hear from people. Mark Allen was speaking recently that he's been trying all sorts of different coaches, but none of them have been able to. Sort of, Barry did. Barry Hawkins credits him for a huge amount of his success, and just loads and loads more. We can't cover them all at all, but yeah, just a very influential figure.
Very much so. And very special character, as I said, frankly, always will be remembered as long as we're all around and far, far beyond, because his name lives on in the history book for his achievements, just what a great, great snooker presence, a great snooker character he was. And of course, we send our deepest condolences to the family and friends of Terry Griffiths. I also want to mention the line that you teed up before, Phil, that sadly also Mark Wildman has died at the age of 88. Wildman won the World Billiards Championship in 1984 and for a number of years was on the Snooker Tour, reaching the semi-finals actually of the 1984 Classic. I remember Mark very well growing up as a snooker commentator. He actually worked for a number of channels, but will be best remembered for commentating on ITV in snooker's boom years of the 1980s and into the 1990s. So many people will remember that names, but certainly those, if you're certain years, you're no doubt, if you don't remember seeing him play, he wouldn't have played in that many matches on television, but he would have played in some, but you certainly remember the voice because he was a very familiar one describing snooker from all those years and decades gone by. So, of course, condolences as well to the family and friends of Mark Wildman. We're going to focus on matters on the table. But first, we should say you are listening here to the Talking Snooker podcast with Phil Haigh and Nick Metcalf. Phil, what a UK championship. I mean, bloody hell. I mean, any idea, from my point of view, and if you disagree with this, please get in contact, because I know that sometimes people say, oh, it's a very Brit-centric thing to say. But I mentioned in a piece in Sporting Life beforehand that it elevate the season. And to me, any idea that this wasn't the biggest event of the season is for the birds. I mean, for me, it was the biggest, and at times the biggest by a country mile. I watched nearly all of it. And there were little tests for me, like when I'm at the railway station, waiting for a train, having a look at the phone, trying to catch the live action, not wanting to miss anything. It was just, I thought, brilliant. Moments when it dipped a bit standard-wise, we'll come to that. Not every match was brilliant, but so many were. And we had a good winner. We've had a brilliant winner in Judd Trump, haven't we? His second UK title, 13 years after his first, and his fifth Triple Crown event. He beat Barry Hawkins 10-8 in a terrific final. So let's start by praising Judd, Phil. I mean, never mind anything else. What a season. What a season. He won in Saudi Arabia, of course. He won in Shanghai. He's now won this one. And look, I'm sometimes among those people that say he hasn't always delivered in the biggest events. So as far as I'm concerned, it's very right and proper that I'm at the front of the queue saying, hearty congratulations when he does. He's won it. He was the best player over the week. He showed his supreme match playing skills to me. Chips were down at times, but this now, I'm not going to say old, only 35, but older Judd Trump. He can deal with all those situations. And he's frankly just a marvellous winner of the tournament.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it was thoroughly deserved. Really tough run through. You know, when you come in at such a high seed as Judd Trump does to tournaments, you think you might get eased in a bit, but no such thing. We'll get to his run through. But final as well. I mean, he looked to be very much in control at one point, but Barry never gave up, made it very hard. And yeah, I thought the final was absolutely superb, really entertaining. Um, Good quality, which, as you mentioned, through the week, it wasn't always, but really great. The crowd was so into it. Did look like Barry was going to pull off a massive return, massive comeback at one point, but Judd was excellent. So, yeah, thoroughly deserved win. Just brilliant performance throughout. And I think it was only earlier in the week when people were saying I'd heard people calling Kyron the best player in the world at the minute. And obviously that's a fluid thing that can change at any minute. But Judd's got it at this minute now.
Yeah, I had your voice in my head actually a couple of times. I usually have your voice in my head during snooker events, Phil, of course. Nothing new in that. But your thing about things changing quickly, as they do across a lot of sports, but they really do in this, because you're right. During the Champion of Champions, I remember a few people, Alan McManus was certainly one of them, and others as well, saying, no doubt, Kyron right now is the best player in the world. They were asking Kyron that. He's saying, yeah, I think I am. 2 or 3 weeks later, we think he's not. We think it's Judd. But that's because events steer by events. They're the two duking out with each other, no question. But yeah, this is a big victory for Judd. I agree with you on the final. Superb. By the way, getting on very nearly 2 million people watching on the BBC. So that's very good news. Good viewing figures on Sunday night. And well, I'll tell you about the final, not in any great detail, but sort of general overview. Well, it was 5-3 to Judd, wasn't it, after the first session? It was actually Barry did sort of well to make it 5-3, actually. It looked like it was going 3-1. He made a brilliant break to win that frame by 1 point, as I recall. Then Judd won 3 in a row for 5-2. This is ominous. Looked like he might win the next Judd. He was first in, but then Barry came with a brilliant 81, and that was, 5-3. Could have sort of been 6-2, maybe not 7-1, but 6-2 it certainly could have been. But then the night sort of made it really special, I think. It was good anyway, but it made it special. First 4 frames shared, 7-5 Judd. Then it was Barry at 7-6. He just couldn't get level, though. Judd stepped up a gear again, really. Breaks of 53 and 133. That was 9-6. But then Hawkins did so well. I mean, last chance saloon stuff there, but breaks of 75 and 82 for 9-8. And boy, did we enjoy the next frame, Phil. I mean, Hawkins was first in with 3-4-5 balls of his own. And that red to middle, my goodness, hitting the near draw, what a moment that was. And the table was there for him because Judd then made 67. Well, that's done and dusted. But then Hawkins, how many snookers? I didn't go back and count them, but I mean, he got one, but he tried and tried to get another one. And Judd just kept escaping him. It was great stuff. Judd eventually potted a brown from distance to get over the line. But you've got to say well done to Hawkins. We often say how unsung he is and unheralded. A bit like that again, because he always is, because he's so unassuming. He got closer than ever before, played really well against Ronnie in the World Final of 13. But the other two he lost pretty convincingly, the Masters final. This was different. But he's playing great players in these finals, Phil, isn't he? He's not playing, you don't tend to play bad players in finals, no bad players or even middling players. But someone sort of said to me, that he really is playing some amazing players in finals. So, yeah, Shame for Barry. He came so close. What an effort. But yeah, I mean, how much did you enjoy that 15, 20 minute spell of Barry trying to get snookers at the end? That was gripping stuff, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was amazing because he went into that frame with all the momentum. Judd didn't pot a ball in those two previous frames. So it was looking a bit, yeah, Judd was still in the lead, but edgy for him for sure. And even when it looked like he'd go over the line, then you're thinking he hasn't because Barry was putting him in. I don't know how many he put him in, a lot. Some of them were real stinkers. Judd was doing really well to get out of them. He got out of a lot of snookers and then to get over the line eventually. But it made for great tension because the crowd was sort of firmly behind Barry, weren't they? They were, and I think maybe if the match had been going a different way, it wouldn't have been so firmly in his camp. It was just they wanted it to go to a decider, didn't they? But
Mm.
it made for a great atmosphere, really tense, and yeah, credit to both players because it just made for a really enjoyable match. I think, and we'll get to this, but the semi-final, Barry semi-final again, the night before, had been sort of not as enjoyable. So this felt like a real sort of release again after that. But yeah, great stuff, and really well spoken by the two at the end. Both were two great speeches. So yeah, it was just a wonderful occasion, really. Exactly what you want from one of these big finals.
Exactly right. And a 30th ranking event for Judd as well. He did so many different things with that win, as you often do when you win big. But one important line into the 30s now for Judd Trump in ranking events, which is obviously an outstanding effort. Well, if I take you back to the first afternoon, Phil, it feels like going back about, never mind a week and a half, but about 3 weeks and a half. I mean, we were younger characters when this was happening. Barry Hawkins beating Ronnie O'Sullivan 6-4 after being 4-2 down. Really notable win for Barry there. Finished the match in brilliant fashion, actually, with those 4 frames in a row to win it. And then Sean Murphy beating Zhao Xingtong. There was an awful lot on that match for various reasons that we all know about, I think. Murphy really doing well to win that decider. That was a really gripping match. I use that word gripping a lot. It was just a gripping tournament for a lot of it. That was superb. Day two, these are only highlights, of course, full results on snooker.org or WST. Day two, Jack Lazowski beat Mark Selby 6-4. I think a lot of people, John Parrott among them, saying that it was the best that Lazowski had ever played, the best performance they'd seen. And I didn't mind that. I thought it was very, very good. I have to say, Wu Yiza beat Si He 6-4 as well. And that was a match we were all looking forward to. In many ways, it did deliver. And perhaps I'll ask you about those first few days now, Phil, before we go on to day three and day four. Top win for Barry on day one. Again, the wisdom of Phil Haig. We put narratives on things after they happened, you know, but the narrative we were all putting on it, I know I was, Ronnie's not playing enough. It doesn't matter who you are. If you're Ronnie O'Sullivan, I know he took that season off when he won the Worlds in 13, took virtually the whole of 12, 13 off. That's a dozen years ago now. Ronnie's older now. And it has to be, you would think, not quite match sharp enough. But also, flip side of the coin, didn't do that much wrong specifically in that match. Credit to Hawkins.
Yeah, I think I'm more in that camp really. It's a bit like the champions game against Zhao Guodong. He looked perfectly good, and then Zhao just got on an unbelievable roll, and Hawkins did similar. Just got outplayed, and maybe it's because he's not been playing much. Maybe he's just not at his best. Throughout his whole career, Ronnie has not dominated everything, and when he's not completely firing, he can be beaten, and that's what's happening at the minute. It's taking really good performances to beat him, and that's what Barry produced there. It was very impressive. Um, yeah, just really good because he's got an awful record, as a lot of people have awful records against Ronnie, but
Yeah.
Barry's is very bad for such a good player. So yeah, really impressive stuff. Another one I watched in that first couple of days was Ding against Milkins. I remember watching that right to the end.
What was that like?
Crazy banter.
I didn't really see that one.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was because Milkins came in with no form at all, and Ding was expected, heavy favourite to win that game. And then Milkins was what 5-3 up, I think,
Oh
and then
yeah.
Ding really went on a roll. He made a big break, 130 odd to take it to a decider, and then there was all the decider. Um, you'd have to go and watch that back. I can't remember all now, but Milkins had a chat yellow, the final yellow, so near the death. Tricky, but gettable. He was really favoured, and a huge win for Rob, who's barely won any game this season. Again, it was just won in China, but yeah, no, it was a memorable game. And then yeah, Lasowski Selby obviously stand out. I think he has played better in terms of he's done Lasowski things better before. You remember he thrashed Murphy in this tournament a couple of years ago, and he was just like unplayable. But I think this was the best in terms of fighting and the other side of the game. I think maybe that was really impressive.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was really good stuff from him.
I mean, day three, I mean, at times was atrocious standard wise. That's a dramatic word, but it was dramatically bad. I mean, I played ITV's Ollie Bell in Tooting, Phil. And I'm not going to say that it was as bad as that. It wasn't. But it was pretty ropey. I mean, Maguire, I saw you put a couple of videos up. I mean, how much was he missing those balls by? It's just for our YouTube audience, I'm putting my hands quite wide apart here. Hopeless on an audio service if you listen in our more traditional formats. But anyway, I mean, Kyron Wilson beat him 6-0. I'm not sure Kyron was that special. I mean, Jack Jones beat Luca Bassell 6-5, another highlight of that day. But I thought both the afternoon and the evening was some really, really bad snooker.
Yeah, Maguire said himself it was as bad as it can get. He couldn't really believe it. It was surprising because he came through a couple of hard qualifying games. He loves it in York. I expected that to be stiff test for Kyron, but it wasn't. As you say, Kyron didn't have to hit his straps really, and he won comfortably. Yeah, I watched Wakeling against Celts as well. That got pretty sticky at times. Michael Holt got a good win that day, 6-1 against Gary Wilson. Um, I mean, that's funny, wasn't it? That was like the world number 95 beating the world number 10, 6-1, which should be absolutely insane, but um, he's not a normal world number 95, really, Michael Holt. But yeah, no, some sticky stuff going on there. And I don't know that we haven't mentioned the conditions. We'll get to the conditions probably the next day because that's when Trump and Robertson played. But maybe they were playing a part. But it looked a lot of edginess, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was probably a bit more to it on Monday. So the play was just so bad. But yes, I mean, conditions were complained about pretty much all week, weren't they? It was a constant theme. They never really improved as far as the players were concerned. I think it's important. I love the pockets, by the way. I mentioned this on social. I thought the pockets were. People say to me, "Oh, they're," and I'm one of the first to criticise them. People. I saw a couple of people sort of writing to me saying, "Oh, this ball and that ball went in." Well, not when I watched it. I mean, the odd one may have crept in, yeah. I mean, but when I complain about pockets, it's generally because they let loads and loads of, I think, crazy pots in. This wasn't the case at all. I mean, in fact, a few times I thought that's in. Oh, wow, how's that stayed out? That goes in on most tables. That was my view. But I think it was more cushions, wasn't it? They were getting funny bounces and sort of heavy conditions, and no players did not like it, I have to say. And we'll come to maybe more specifically some of those complaints in a while because Kyron complained a lot, and certainly late on. I mean, day four, Phil. I mean, that was really compelling, actually, in some ways. That Trump and Robertson. It was 3-1 to Neil, and again, time taken over shots was a theme we got from Mark Allen later, but it was so long ago now you kind of forget. I didn't actually scribble it down, but I remembered now that Neil was getting a bit of stick, wasn't he, for his I'm getting 33 seconds in my head, I think. I'll tell you why, because Hendry was one of the most vociferous ones talking about it actually on television, was saying that Neil himself would just call for 35 second shot clock. And Henry was like, well, yeah, he'd be almost in trouble if that were the case. Listen, I think what's true in both Robertson and Allen's cases is that they're both outstanding snooker players that are maybe, and I think Robertson is back to a large extent, but not completely, and he still has work to do. Mark Allen is at times struggling, and they're saying, well, actually, no, I'm not doing anything wrong here. It's obviously within the rules. I'm struggling, but I'm scrapping. That's what they would say. I know some good snooker judges will say to me in the case of Neil that he's become his own worst enemy. And there's something in that, perhaps. But in terms of that match, I mean, my goodness, that could have been 4-1 to Robertson. He had a big chance in that. What would it have been? That fifth frame. That was vital in the match. And after that, Judd never really looked back. He got stronger and stronger. Robertson kind of fell away. Another match from that day 4, I scribbled down, was Stuart Bingham beating Mark Williams 6-5. Bingham 5-2 down. Another theme of many themes, Phil. Comebacks galore in the tournament. No lead was safe. That was a funny match, and we'll come to it a bit later. Stuart then himself had a big lead, the next one that lost it. So, yeah, I asked Dominic Dale about this, and I'll tell you about that more, talking to the listeners here a bit later. Was there anything in the water? Was there any reason? Because it's a big tournament. Everyone wants to scrap till the end, but so many comebacks, weren't there?
Yeah, there were. Yeah, that was the day I was up there actually. That Tuesday. So I heard all those complaints about the tables and stuff. I think, yeah, you're right about the cushions. I think that the one thing that sort of definitely was unacceptable, there seemed to be a few like rolling off
Oh,
situations,
of course.
which is definitely like really poor. And
Bingham had that one, didn't he? And I got an
yeah,
absolutely insane amount of. I think a few news stories went up about it, so I got an insane amount of hits for that.
yeah,
I've got more viewers than most of the films on Film 4, Phil. But it went along the slate, didn't it? I mean, that was
yeah, yeah,
bad.
yeah.
That was bad.
Yeah, and I think that was one of Kyron's complaints. Not that it was rolling to one side of the table. So yeah, you can see why they're frustrated if that's the case. But yeah, yeah, I didn't expect William up. He didn't, but that was not a great quality match, really. But that day, of course, was the day that Zhang Anda made a 147. So it did seem that the table 2 was playing a lot easier than table 1, or just better. Because yeah, Zhang knocking in a max out, which was amazing, and it looked like that was nailed on from very early on, and he plays in such a sort of composed way. He made it's a very run of the mill 147. It was very impressive. Um, but yeah, no, that was very much a day for table complaints. Mark Williams um, was trying not to say much because he thought he was going to get fined, but he made it clear he wasn't happy. Even the winners were complaining. Bingham and Trump were saying it, and they won that day. And you heard all sorts of reasons. People were saying the weather. Someone suggested the floor wasn't level. Bingham was saying it was Ronnie and Luca's triangle chalk that was
Oh
getting in
yeah,
the cloth. So we had all sorts of theories. But yeah, people in general weren't delighted with them.
that's right. I'm glad you remembered the chalk because that counteracts with the town chalk, doesn't it? And it makes the town chalk irrelevant if they're playing with their own chalk. I think that's the way to say it. So yeah, it's difficult. I tend to leave that kind of thing to more technically minded people than me. There are plenty of those around in snooker. There are so many variables, and it was a shame because even from a relative layman as I am in those technical ways, you could see funny bounces off cushion. That just did funny things there. The players were getting frustrated. And listen, we'll maybe have our say on Kyron Wilson's specific complaints later in the tournament. But I did find it interesting to say that players will lose confidence, maybe in their technique or the way they're playing. Everything sort of half starts to fall apart like the tables on to their liking. That did kind of make sense to me actually when I heard him say that.
Mm.
Right, into the last 16 then. And as tradition dictates almost, we have the results from that stage onwards. Barry Hawkins beat David Gilbert 6-5. Sean Murphy beat Ding Junhui 6-5. He's loads of good long matches. Jack Lazowski beat Ali Carter 6-4. Mark Allen saw Wu Yiza 6-4. Judd Trump 6, John Higgins 5. I mean, my goodness me. I can't remember who it was now. Was it Parrott talking about millimetres? I mean, the fine margins of this game. I think John may have been trying to get on the blue. He was first in on that decider. He was 34-0 ahead, but didn't quite get on the next ball. I think it was the blue. Broke down. Loads of safety. And then John played I thought, an unfathomably bad shot. I
Yeah.
mean, maybe go straight to you, but that was, I mean, he left Judd not a gimme in the middle. And I have a couple of theories in my head about that. I was kind of surprised and not totally convinced about the way John talked about that afterwards, because listen, he's the most straight up person in the world, John Higgins. But I don't know if he was not quite letting on how disappointed he was. He was, to me, that was such an un-John Higgins moment. I could scarce believe it.
Yeah, unless he was just sort of because he'd done it himself, he could accept that. You can't moan about anything if you've just made such a glaring error. Maybe that's the way he was looking at it, but it was very odd. Yeah, it could only have been sort of lapse in concentration, really, after, as you say, quite a lengthy safety bout, but nothing that he's not seen before, obviously. But then, yeah, it wasn't, as you say, wasn't straightforward for Judd to even pot that first ball, never mind win the match from there. So it was very impressive. But yeah, unusual, but great match. And to Judd to get through Robertson Higgins before the quarters, that gets you sort of still ready for the rest of it, I imagine.
Yeah, and I think he talked about, he's in it, or maybe he said he tried to go up a level, and boy, did he do that. He went up several levels in many ways after that. I mean, Shang under six, Stuart Bingham five. Again, a sort of crazy match where Leeds were lost. Bingham 5-1 ahead. He was disturbed when he on the 14th black. I didn't watch this match live, actually. Um, I think I'd have been watching. Would it be the same as Trump Higgins? I'm not sure why. I didn't. I saw
Yeah,
bits of
it
it.
was same session, I
Same
think.
time, that's right. What a session then. And he was disturbed on the 14th black. Obviously, I see the clip of it by a photographer, Stuart, saying there is kryptonite. And he did that pointing thing. What I would say is, I love Stuart to death. When it comes to players that are liable to be disturbed by something, he's right up there. I'm not saying he's not being disturbed, but the number of times I can see Stuart pointing at different things, he must be hypersensitive. People should be still and quiet. Don't get me wrong; it's their mistake, but he's really sensitive to it. And a lot of people said, "Oh, that seemed to put him off," but I double checked the scores. He did win the next frame, so it wasn't like that was put him off, and then he never did anything else again. He did win the next frame, but after that, I mean, Zhang Anda, credit to him, what a fight back to win 6-5. And then maybe just a couple more from that round. Kyron Wilson 6, Chris Wakelin 2. And then I watched Michael Holt 6, Jack Jones 5, which, like loads of people, I absolutely loved. I texted you about it, actually. I remember that night. I mean, so much fun from Michael. I loved his body language. I loved his attitude. He did that thing almost about play like it means nothing when it means everything. And that's not true of him. He's actually very intense in some ways about his snooker. But the way he was happy-go-lucky a bit with the crowd, joking. I don't know if you saw that bit where someone made the noise. Now that's your fault if I lose now, and then ended up doing really well. I think maybe made the winning break from that point. But it was brilliant stuff. Good play, obviously, Jack Jones, and that was rolling back the years. 25 years since he'd been that far at the UK. Phil, I mean, it was. I was looking through his run in '99. It was really very much all our yesterday. So brilliant stuff. So again, so much for you to talk about there and reflect on. But yeah, obviously, I know you want to talk about Michael Holt, but that's for Stuart Bingham. I mean, what did happen there? I mean, I wonder if it's a bit of an age thing because he's lost a few other leads as well, I think, and also what he's done is I've noticed that he's done it a couple of crucibles. It happened in the last semi actually. Players go on real runs against him that I don't think it used to happen. He seems to be much more prone now and vulnerable to players winning frame after frame after frame. So it's a funny one, but boy, I saw one.
Yeah, because he looked so good though when he took that lead 5-1 up, and he'd made two centuries and another break. Um, yeah, it was just very, very impressive. It was a complete game of two halves. But Zhang has shown he can do that to people. So uh, yeah, I mean, and Bingham had just done it to Williams. So you just can't predict these things, can you? But yeah, I think everyone was enjoying Holt's return to the big stage, and he looked. I think that showed sort of how he's worked on his game and himself, because I don't think in previous times when he went 5-2 behind and to go 5-2 behind that seventh frame, he was 60 points up. He'd made a 60. And then to lose it from there, Jones cleared up with 70 odd. Um, his head would have gone in the past, and it didn't. And he won the last four with two or three big breaks in there. So yeah, really impressive. And as I said, it's so silly that he's number 95 in the world because he's clearly a much better player than that. Um, and he shot up a long way up the rankings, obviously by getting to the quarterfinals. And even there, he competed with Kyron pretty well. He lost 6-3 in the end, but He looked good in parts there. Um, but yeah, Judd Trump was the star of the show, the quarterfinals, though. No question. Battering Zhang Anda.
Yeah,
Um, I mean, 6-2 doesn't it was just it was ridiculous. He won the first four frames without Zhang scoring a point. He was 500 odd unanswered points, wasn't it?
yeah,
So yeah, hugely impressive. That was you mentioned Trump's stepping up a few levels.
yeah.
That was the few levels there. And then Barry Hawkins six, Sean Murphy two, continue his impressive one, and Mark Allen six, Jack Lisowski three. So sort of went with the favourites there. I don't know. Murphy might have been favourite against Hawkins, but a bit more predictable at the quarterfinal stage.
Yeah, I thought it. I didn't lose sleep over it, but I thought it took the romance out of the tournament a tiny little bit that day because I was saying that, you know, I don't know if this is good or bad. I've never really been one of those people to gauge a tournament or, the success of it by how many stories there are. I'm not that kind of journalist, but even I was kind of thinking, God, for our business, there's lots of stories emerging here, and I felt that took it away from it a bit in the court. Not that we didn't have great semis and finals to talk about. Don't get me wrong, but listen, it was probably asking too much for Michael Holt to win again in some ways, wasn't it? He's playing the world champion, as you say, it was only 6-3, and Kyle had to work for it to some extent. Yeah, Murphy was impressed by Hawkins, giving him a bit of an ovation, wasn't he? And as Sean is often wont to do, of course. And yeah, I scribbled it down. It was 500 odd. It was 527 unanswered points from Judd. Absolutely ridiculous. In fact, it was breaks of 89, 126, 120, 131, 61, and 120. Just absolutely marvellous. And well, people were dreaming, many people in snooker, of a Lisowski triumph, weren't they? And what support he got up there. But he did nothing wrong, really, just beaten by a very, very good player in Mark Allen. And, well, a big thing happened on Saturday, Phil. I arrived. That's not a big thing, is it? Let's be honest. Semi-finals. And what a semi-final Saturday it was in many ways. I mean, two contrasting matches. Judd Trump 6, Kyron Wilson 2. Kyron won the first two frames, but didn't do a lot after that. I mean, he really fell away in the match. Trump won the next six. Two breaks exactly of 100 and a 65 in there from Judd. This is what Kyron said afterwards. I don't like to drop anyone in it, but for me, you've got to be looking at the table fitters. The tables have been really, really poor all week. If World Snooker want to have great matches, great rivalries, they need to be looking at conditions a little bit more. He made the point that he was saying it when he won, which is fair.
Mm.
There was a consistency there. And among not just Cohen, but a few of the players, actually, they were saying it when they won, a lot of them. But yeah, not happy at all. And that phrase saw one. Listen, he's won the world championship. He's reached the UK semi. He's riding high in the game in so many ways, Kyron. But you still feel he wants to do so much that he was left thinking, I really wanted to put another one on Judd on a big stage. And it might take him a while to sort of shake off the disappointment of that, I feel.
Maybe, yeah, it's probably, you know, I guess when you get to his sort of standards and what he expects of himself, semi-final, it would almost be no less annoying to lose in the semi-final than if you lost in the first round. Even might be more annoying because it's such a opportunity to, like you said, get another one over and Judd maybe have a further argument to be the best player in the world. So to sort of underperform there and lose fairly comfortably will be very frustrating for him. I don't think he's the kind of guy who'll get down on stuff like that for too long, but
Hmm.
yeah, he'll be disappointed with that for sure because yeah, he'd been looking good, hasn't he? And then yeah, that was one of his worst performances for a while, I should say. And then we moved on to one that got people talking a lot, not always for the best reasons. It was a long game. Barry Hawkins six, Mark Allen five. It's one of those. I think people say one for the purists. It was a slugfest. I think they both said it wasn't pretty at times. A lot of the times, I think that's fair. But yeah, Hawkins got over the line. What, just before 1 o'clock in the morning, was it? Um, and yeah, I mean, it's, even fairer play for his performance in the final, coming off that such little sleep, and he must have been shattered, but he did well to get over the line.
He did, and sometimes I make a point of looking, and I sometimes forget, which really annoys me because I get in the press room and it's never quite clear, but I double checked, and it was 12:57 a.m. because I thought matches, especially big Triple Crown matches, are so rare that sit the other side of 1 a.m. And I went in the arena for the last two. I think this might just do it, but it didn't. It didn't. It's funny how it's very nerdy for me, but an awful lot of the biggest matches, I think Dot Ebden falls in this category, and one or two others as well. They finished just before one, and this was another one of those. But yes, goodness, so much to talk about. What I want to say first, a bit off the off piste, if you like, off piste, is that I think, Phil, that it depends on what you're doing a lot, personally, as fans and as watchers, for these sort of matches. I'm fascinated by when it tips over from, because one of the reasons I fell in love with the sport was long form snooker. I still love it. If I had to choose between a long frame with players missing and all sorts of drama and a quick break, I'd probably still pick the former. Probably now, I probably would. Even if it's a genius Ronnie century. I've seen lots of Ronnie genius centuries, they're all wonderful, but I just love those. But I think Saturday at times may have crossed into something different that was less enjoyable. But I'm fascinated as to what the tipping point is. And for all of us, it's a bit different. And what I thought was, it really depends on what you're doing. Now, I didn't have an absolutely massive amount of work to do on Saturday. I probably could have gone away and watched it from afar, but I thought I'd stay. I wasn't in York for long. I'm going to stay for the whole night. And I was thinking, had I been on the sofa with a blanket and match of the day on the old double screening with the snooker on, I'd have probably had the time of my life. And I'd have been saying, this is bloody wonderful night. Great. Because I'm there in the sort of press room with still a bit of work to do and work on my mind. And listen, I'm not going to, I think it's betraying a big secret that I spoke to plenty of the biggest hitters in the game that night, and they were not enjoying it. I'm not going to name names, but plenty of people were not enjoying that match. But also, I'll say, I put a note on Twitter up about what people were thinking, and plenty of people were saying, no, for them it was compelling. For them, they may have been at home with a blanket, Phil, of course. They were saying for them, no, it was compelling. And the decider obviously was, but just generally, they loved it. That's part of the game for them. So I'm sort of fascinated by just what is the tipping point for different people. But listen, let's tell you what Sean Murphy said while commentating on the BBC. He said, now it's completely within the rules, but at what stage do we question whether the amount of time Mark Allen is taking over simple decisions is a tactic to annoy his opponent? I can't see any reason other than that for why he's taking so long. Our colleague Shane McDermott asked Mark about his comments straight away afterwards, and Mark clearly not too pleased. And Mark himself was on Twitter and said this. First of all, more generally, for those criticising, I always give 100%. It might not be pretty at times, but I'm trying my best. Some other players could learn from it. And then specifically on Sean Murphy, he said this. As for Sean in comms, he's absolutely entitled to his opinion on things, but perhaps best to leave personal feelings out of the commentary box in future, all because I called out some of his recent BS. They must have fallen out, by the way. I like Mark and Sean a lot. They're both great snooker characters for me. But I'll tell you what I don't want them doing, which in fairness they're not doing, that I've heard. I don't want those two playing this, it's just us two having banter. It's just what we do. Because that's not the way friends talk to each other and about each other, in my view. And if they are doing, then it's time for a calling of the friendship, not an ending of the friendship. That's a very dramatic thing that happens rarely in life, thankfully, but a calling. Because I have heard people say to me, and I've seen it on different forums and stuff, oh, it's just, the media or people in general falling for this banter. Nah, sorry. Maybe in the past, when people from outside our world and the wider media, they were writing some ridiculous things. Oh, massive feud, but it was just them being funny with each other. This isn't like that. They're saying far too mean things, the friends don't say about each other. Things that, like one of them is saying that was it Mark said about Sean that he says one thing in public and one thing to us and one thing to the press and all this sort of stuff. You know, Mark now saying he called out his BS. You know, this is not the sort of stuff that people that are getting on say about each other. That would what I would say. But it made for a tetchy night and a dramatic night. For I don't know what your verdict would be generally on what I've just said, or just these sort of increasingly sort of tetchy and unpleasant words between the two, frankly. And maybe just about Mark and this so-called tactic. I like to think I take Mark at face value. He's saying I'm struggling, I'm finding it hard, but I'm scrapping, a bit like Neil Robertson earlier in the week. I'm not going to give, oh, there we are, Barry, you have the match. I'm not playing well. There we are, Colonel. You have this one tonight. He's doing everything he can to win, and that includes taking a longer time than some people would like. It's not a new thing. He's been playing quite slowly for a long time, actually. So it's not something out of the blue. Oh, Mark Allen's playing slowly. He's been playing slowly for quite a long time, actually. So I can see why people sometimes think this is a bit of a long time overshot, but I don't know if I go as far as saying a tactic, but I would go as far as saying that the stuff between these two is not, at the moment, banter, Phil Hay.
Yeah, I agree with that. I did ask Sean about it a while ago, but there's been quite a lot of comments now, so stuff has happened since then. And he just said he didn't think they'd fallen out as far as he was aware. They disagree on things, sure, but he didn't think they'd fallen out. But Mark has said a few other things since then. So I don't know what the status is. I would love them to get in a room and talk about it, and if we could watch it or listen to it, I'd be very interested to hear. Um, but yeah, it certainly doesn't feel like banter anymore. You're right, it used to be, but I'm not sure it is anymore. But only they will know that. Yeah, I think it's like what you said about Neil. I don't see it as a tactic. I'm struggling for form. He said he's struggling for form for a while now. He said I think it was an interview with Shane. He said he can't remember last time he was playing really well. Um, and I think it just gets in their heads and they're overthinking it. I asked Neil about this when he came through the qualifiers because Judd had sort of suggested there's a lot of slow play in that champion and champions match. And I said, is that any sort of intentional thing? And he said, no, absolutely not. He said that Joe Perry had a go at him over one shot in particular where he was on the blue and he was just like desperately looking for the right angle that he could work out to get on the next colour perfectly. And he spent, ages on this shot, which was very, very simple shot. And I think it's just a confidence issue. And both those guys, they're just in the latter stage of the UK Championship, so they're not completely off it, but they're not at their peaks. And that can fry your brain a bit and make you see people talk about that, don't they? They go and just all they see is problems. I think that's probably the issue for them at the minute. So yeah, I wouldn't think it's tactics. I would think he's just struggling. But what I would say, and I'm sure coaches would say this, the only way to get back to your fluent best is to try and play it if you're fluent best. I think going and playing this sort of very slow, methodical style, it might scrap you through results. But when are you going to get back to your best playing like that? I don't see how you do. I think you've just got to, if you really feel like you can't pot a ball, then go into that mode. But I think you've got to try and play as you would play when you're performing well, and just wait for it to click back into gear. Because because as you said, Mark's been playing like this for a while now, and I don't know how he's going to get out of it by continuing to play that way. So yeah, it's a tricky one, but yeah, I agree. I wouldn't call it tactics. I would just say he's struggling for some.
Yeah, wise words from you. I'm already conscious of time, but frankly, I think this is one of our busiest episodes of the season, actually. I will say that now. There's so much going on. We're going to wrap up the UK generally and say that was actually, amid everything else, seemed like a lot of focus on Mark, a smashing win for Barry. I was there for the last two frames. He had a great break to go 5-5 and then played brilliantly and they decided to win it. That red that towards the end that got him in for those crucial final pots was smashing. And then, of course, we're left with the final. Judd Trump winning it, beating Barry Hawkins 10-8. I mean, coverage-wise, pretty good. I mean, obviously, I liked. Who didn't like the BBC reversed into their old theme tune, Phil? And well, they had a big collection of characters doing commentary, didn't they? My goodness. I'm not sure if that was the new production company, Sunset and Vine, finding their feet and trying people out, or whether that's going to be general what they try and do going forward. But obviously, a number of players that played in the tournament were among those to commentate, and we did hear a lot of voices. Eurosport was as top notch as usual. Really, that's what I would say about them. Good authority about their coverage, great passion about their coverage, and generally, I watch more the BBC, and that's not a favouritism thing. It's probably I'm a very old person thing, and I'm used to the Beeb over the years. But I think it's also just a numbers game. There's not many days of snooker on the BBC, whereas I can watch so many more of US sport. But it's on the Beeb. I tend to focus on the Beeb. But listen, I follow both, and there was obviously many good things to say about the coverage across the board. As I say, nearly 2 million viewers watched the climax of the final on BBC Two. I was having a bit of a chat with Ivan Hersovich actually over the last couple of days, and he was saying WST will be revealing more about the viewing figures across the board in the next day or two, and they're brilliant. Apparently, they are brilliant in every sense, and hits as well. And I know the BBC had lots of hits on the website, so people are following the game, Phil. And obviously the reach of the BBC. I was saying to Jamie Broughton in the press room from the BBC, he made a good point actually. He said that some others can do that multi. What's the word? They can attack things on different fronts. He was making the point that News International can to some extent. They got Talk Sport and they got the Times and Times Radio, and I thought that's a fair point. But nobody can do it like the BBC can. Nobody can get near in some ways with the television, the radio, online, and it means it feels like more of a story in national terms. There's big viewing figures. It's not the main channel in this country, BBC Two. There would have been big stuff on BBC One, big stuff on ITV. So for 2 million to watch in this day and age is pretty good. So yeah, worth me about the coverage, sir. And then we can move on to the 544 other things we got to talk about snooker tonight.
Yeah, yeah. I always mix between the two. It's nice to have the BBC on. Obviously, Ronio going out early means you get a bit of the Rocket on Eurosport punditry duty, which is a real mixed bag. It's a bit like his sort of his season, really, when he turns up to tournaments, he doesn't really want to be in, and then you can tell when he's dialed in. Because some sessions he didn't really offer much at all, but then other times absolutely brilliant. There was an amazing conversation he had with Kyron after his second round win, I think it was, and he was talking about a message he'd sent him saying about how this is your time, you need to capitalise. And he was saying how he thinks he's the best player in the world at the
Oh,
minute.
I saw that. Yeah.
Yeah, it was just a really fascinating conversation. And there's a great bit where he was in with Rianne and they were talking through Zhang's 147 going in. So, yeah, you get all sorts when the Rockets in there, some good, some bad. But when it's good, it's really good. But yeah, it was interesting with all those current players, as in not just current players, or in tournament players. It feel like a lot. I'm not one of these people that have like a big problem with current players being in it, but it did feel like almost too much. Um, so yeah, we'll see. I don't know why. I have no information as to why this wasn't the case. But someone like Joe Perry, who's done a lot for the BBC recently, I don't know why he wasn't there. Um, so yeah, we'll see. As you say, we'll see if that's a strategy going forward in the rest of the Triple Crown events. But yeah, as always, having the two options is just lovely stuff. And you can mix and match wherever you like.
Indeed, brilliant week for the game, I thought. Brilliant week for the sport. Absolutely fascinating to follow the UK Championship. Congratulations to Judd Trump. Congratulations to everybody that put the tournament on, the organisers, the officials, us journalists, Phil. We covered it as best we could, didn't we? And all the players, of course, and everyone really there in York for contributing to the tournament. I was up there towards the end, as I say. My old alma mater, always beautiful there. By no means certain it's going to be at York long time into the future. May not be, but I think I sense that if it's not, there will be an event in York still. That's just my educated guess, because I think that snooker's built up a good relationship with the city now, special place York. So we'll wait and see developments on that. But let's move on. We should say you are listening here to Talking Snooker with Phil Haig and Nick Metcalf. What a boring Masters draw, Phil. I mean, it's just nothing. Yeah, you can't, not much to say about it at all. Of course, I'm having a laugh because it was brilliant. And the headline story is Ronnie O'Sullivan against John Higgins. There's some smashing matches, but that is just going to be mouth-watering. I'm not certainly able to get there myself on January the 12th, but boy, I'll try because that is special. 30 years since their first Masters meeting. Coming up at the tournament, let's remember where we'll be celebrating 50 years of the Masters. What a way to kick it off, O'Sullivan Higgins. Let me quickly go through the rest of them for you. On the evening of January the 12th, it's Sean Murphy, Gary Wilson. Then the following day, January the 13th, the Monday, it's Mark Williams, Ding Junhui, and Mark Selby, Ali Carter. Then Tuesday, January the 14th, Judd Trump against Barry Hawkins. That rings a bell. They must have played recently. And Mark Allen, C2IE. And then on Wednesday, January the 15th, Kyron Wilson, Zhang Anda, and Luca Purcell, Chris Wakelin. Obviously, every match is mouth-watering and tantalising. But O'Sullivan against John Higgins, I mean, that is going to be. We've seen some great atmospheres over the years. We had one for Higgins and Williams in recent times, didn't we? Ali, Phil. That is going to be an immense snooker atmosphere.
Yeah, I think it was the first out of the hat when they drew that in York. So what a way to what a way to start things. What a way to start the tournament. Yeah, unbelievable. And yeah, Williams against Ding was a real standout. I mean, they're all good, aren't they? Trump, Hawkins, obviously. So yeah, I mean, it happens every year. We always say they could all be finals almost. Not quite all of them, but near enough. And yeah, it's just brilliant throughout. So can't wait. It's weird, isn't it? It feels like you're building up towards the UK for ages, and then the Masters come straight away afterwards. And I'm not complaining. It's lovely stuff.
It really is. We've got loads of snooker before the Masters,
Yeah.
and an event we both bloody love. The shootout starts tomorrow, Wednesday. We're recording this on Tuesday night, underway tomorrow. So Wednesday and through until Saturday. It's in Leicester this time. The defending champion is Mark Allen, so he can play quickly when he needs to, Phil. And I'm not being flippant, of course, because different tournaments require different play, frankly. He's playing Ross Muir, Mark Allen. Some others I picked out, which I did. It doesn't really matter who's playing who in some ways. It's more just enjoy the shootout. But there's some fun ones. Gary Wilson's got Rhiannon Evans. Barry Hawkins, Sean Murphy. Good Lord. In the shootout. Ali Carter, Chris Wakelin. That's a mini good Lord. Chet Chio on News got Jimmy White. Some guy called Jimmy, I don't know. And Jack Lazowski, Julian Boyko. That's a few I picked out. But really, Phil, we're just going to enjoy it, isn't it? It's rapid, quick fire action over the next 4 days. And yeah, wouldn't want it all the time. But now we got it. We wouldn't want to not have it, eh?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I always enjoy it. Yeah, there are a few that I looked at as well. But as you say, it's just strap in for a few days, Wednesday
Strap
to
in.
Saturday. I think now it's in this sort of pre-Christmas slot, final on the Saturday. Rowdiness levels that Friday and Saturday night will be through the roof. So yeah, not everyone's cup of tea as we know, but I'll be enjoying it. I was speaking to Rob Walker up in York. I don't think he's done the shootout before as on MC duties, but he's doing it this year and he's looking forward to it. He told me slash warned me he's going to have some fun with it, so we can. The mind boggles, but I think it's going to be enjoyable.
Well, you may think it's going to be enjoyable, but we'll wait and see. The shy and retiring Rob Walker, yeah. The Scottish Open starts next Monday in Edinburgh. And another big tournament coming up. Gary Wilson aiming to win the title for the 3rd year in a row. He kicks off against Long Shihang. And a full list of matches coming up can be found on snooker.org or the World Snooker Tour website. We'll hope to be along, won't we, Phil, on the air early in that tournament to have a look at events there. And of course, we'll have our usual review at the end. But this is just a brilliant time of year, isn't it? The shootout followed by the Scottish Open. We always enjoy the home nations events. They always give us a chance, don't they, in this business to to explore all manner of stories, especially those opening days when there's so much going on. Good value for money, as I often say, when we're focused on ticket prices. We often mean the Crucible. We're all guilty of that, or often mean the Triple Crowns. Actually, across the season, there's still some very good value, and the Home Nations comes into that category. So I know quite a few fans I've been speaking to and seeing on forums are looking forward to the shootout and attending that, but quite a few as well, particularly Scottish fans, of course, are looking forward to Edinburgh. So cracking events coming up. Yeah, Gary Wilson likes the Scottish Phil. I mean, he wins 3 in a row. Two was pretty sensational. 3 will be bloody amazing.
Yeah, yeah, especially because he's not been in any sort of form. It really would be incredible this time round. But you get funny results. I feel like after the UK, the slot before Christmas, pretty unpredictable. So we'll see. There'll be some surprise results in there, and then we always get those qualifiers just before Christmas, where all sorts of weird stuff happens. So yeah, expect the unexpected in Edinburgh, I think. But again, a lovely city after York. Two of the best this country's got to offer. Um, so yeah, there's so much going on, isn't there? Plenty to look forward to.
Very much so, Phil. Indeed. And yes, amen to that. York and Edinburgh, my goodness, yeah. And I mean, I was just thinking about York, when I was there, particularly I had a chance to go into the city briefly, right in the centre of the city. Well, I mean, the Barbican's in the centre of the city, but I had a chance to walk into, round about the Minster and what have you. And I was saying to a couple of people actually since then, York was always a relatively busy city when I knew it 30 years ago, but it was nothing like it is now. In fact, I remember distinctly walking through York on Sundays, Sunday afternoon, Sunday evenings, back in the day, like the 90s, and it was just nothing like it is now. Of course, you didn't have Christmas markets there. That's a big attraction of the last, say, 10, 15 years. But just generally, York is such a busy city now. And I'll tell you what, trying to get a hotel room in that city for anything that doesn't break the bank. I mean, I was staying out in an Airbnb in Heworth, and I was very happy to do that. Perfectly pleasant part of the city. But yeah, it's so sort of mad there now. And Edinburgh's the same. What a city that would be. So romantic at Christmas. If you are going to enjoy it, let's move on then and say Rhiannon Evans won the Women's Masters title at Frames in London. A 7th Masters title for Evans, but her first for over a year. And well, she did it the hard way. She beat world champion Bayu Liu 4-2 in the semi-finals. Then Mink Nutcharat 4-3 in the final. A word about the highest break of the tournament, a 1-1-1 made by Rebecca Kenner in the group stages. But, well, that old phrase, Phil, about form being temporary, class being permanent. It might not have pleased Rhiannon on many levels, I'm sure, having to wait this long, seeing if some of her rivals, some of her younger rivals in particular, pick up these prizes. But she's back in the winner's circles, looking at the scores. What a scrap that final was. But she got over the line. And, of course, we offer her congratulations.
Yeah, definitely a great win and to beat Bayern in the semis and then Mink in the final. Superb, and Rebecca Kenner in the quarters as well. So yeah, very impressive. Still got it for sure. By sort of the coming of the women's game, obviously Mink's been impressive, and on Yi, there's not loads to, but Rhiannon's still very much capable on her day. Yeah, so she'll be delighted with that. Very pleased for her.
Exactly, and Ondi was the other semi-finalist, wasn't she? So all the big hitters got to the latter stages, but Rhiannon was the one that got over the line and won the title. So as we say, hats off to her. A couple of more lines from there. Thailand's Nucha Ferempful, who is only 18, won the under-21 title. And Tessa Davidson, who must have Britain's biggest trophy cabinet, Phil, won the seniors title. I used that line to Matt Hewitt. By the way, I've not even told you this yet, so I'm sending this on there. I did speak about some people we might get on the pod, and I mentioned Tessa actually to Matt, and Matt thinks that would be a good character to get on. So we'll try and do that maybe in 2025. Right. Yeah, should really get into the habit of telling you stuff not on the air before I tell you on the air. But we've always ripped up the rule book on this pod. We've got busy lives, haven't we? We can't tell each other everything. Let's move on. Any other business? And well, we'll catch up properly with your correspondence in our next episode. Just a couple of bits, though, from our dear listeners. Brian Campbell writes to us, and we'll read out your full email next time, Brian. Thank you for that. But you do kindly say, I've really been enjoying Nick's radio snooker. These podcast snooker vignettes are a little treat whenever they appear on my feed. Keep up the great work. Very kind of you, Brian. There is a new service from me. It's called Radio Snooker with Nick Metcalf, and it did go live in York. I spoke to Ken Doherty, Dominic Dale, and Tatiana Wollaston over the weekend. Now, Tatiana was happy to speak to me, Phil, just before, it was less than an hour before going out there for the final session in her first Triple Crown final. And it wasn't arranged. I just bumped into her. I think I was popping out to get a drink. And, oh, Tatiana, how are you? Do you mind having a word? Could have easily said no. Wouldn't have been any issue from me at all. But she said, yes, I'll do it. And aren't we spoiled in this sport? My goodness, we really are. And I have to say, just to say about the other lines, Ken was talking to me about how much he enjoys the tournament and the rivalry between Judd Trump and Kyron Wilson, how it could really go on for many years to come. And Dominic, well, we're going to keep asking him, Phil, about whether he's having second thoughts. And I can tell you, as we keep asking, he's getting further and further away from second thoughts. In fact, he's saying, I'm having affirmation. He said, when I saw the devastation of some of these guys losing this week, I made the right decision with knobs on, he's saying. But I should say, I also commentated on the closing stages of the final. You can hear that across a range of platforms, including on Apple and Spotify. And it's very easy to Bluetooth any of the coverage to your transistors. I'll be listening back to the commentary on my wireless set at home, and I've been so pleased about it. I was very happy to do it. As far as I'm aware, there's never been proper radio coverage of snooker's big moments. Until now, that is. And all being well, I'll be at Alexandra Palace next month to bring you commentary at the closing stages of the Masters, and I'll hopefully be grabbing some more of those snooker personalities as well to send out more of those bite-sized interviews. So Radio Snooker with Nick Metcalf is available now. And it's true what they say, Phil, I have got a lovely radio face. I really have. It's one of the nicest ones around anywhere.
No, I was very impressed. I was looking forward to what was to come from Radio Snooker, and a very, very impressive start from you, I must say. That interview with Tatiana was great, and as you say, but brilliant stuff in the middle of a match, and congratulations to her as well for first Triple Crown final. And yeah, I really loved your chatting to the fans straight after the final. That was really good. So heartily recommend Nick's new service there. Enjoyable things.
That's really sweet of you. Yeah, I'm not going to reinvent the wheel with this. I mean, what I did in that weekend is sort of my vision for what it is. It's short interviews. We've had our fill forever and a day with long interviews on this podcast, Phil. I don't want that to be the case of Radio Snooker, and nor do the guys I speak to. I want short interviews while I'm at tournaments. I want to make myself busy with tournaments, and this does that job for me. I love meeting people in snooker, and that they won't all say yes by any means. And as you probably heard with the reaction, some of those fans didn't want to speak. That's fine as well. I'll try with my luck, and it's very much a live service and commentary as well. And look, in time, I may try and incorporate some element of live commentary. I'm a little bit less sure about that, and not in the terms of talking. I think I can talk. I can talk for England, Scotland, Ireland, and Wales, Phil, frankly. But it's more the technological side that is never quite, me and technology never quite happy bedfellows. So it may stay as live for now, but I love doing it. Thank you very much for your kind words. And I hope if you're out there, you fancy trying something a little bit new, then please do have a listen to Radio Snooker. We've got Brian McGovern. Everyone that's called Brian loves the podcast, Phil. I mean, a few other people with different names to us as well. But if your name is Brian, you love talking snooker. Brian McGovern says to us about some new podcast services we're really grateful for. Say, Brian, thanks for your recent emails. We do appreciate it. You actually also say you thoroughly enjoyed your first live snooker event. You were at both sessions of the Northern Ireland Open final in Belfast between Judd Trump and Kyron Wilson. And that obviously not a bad match for your debut. We're glad you enjoyed it. You also mention these podcasts and say whether we knew about them. Well, I did, but it's a good chance for us to mention them on here. Firstly, there's Cue the Chat, which is presented by Fionn Lynch, which is coming out pretty regularly, I've noticed, across the usual podcast outlets. And that's very good. It's lovely to have another Irish voice, frankly, talking about the game in the podcast world, because I meet so many Irish fans at tournaments, Phil. And some of them are Irish people that live in here in Britain and the UK, but plenty have come over, especially in Sheffield, but not only Sheffield, other events as well. Such a hotbed, such a great deep love of the game in Ireland. So that's good to have Cue the Chat around. And there's also Scott McCarter and Kelly Barker with their 15 Reds podcast, which is currently available on YouTube. Now, that's actually not a new podcast. Scott used to present that pod with some other friends of his some while ago, but it's now back and with Scott and Kelly. And they really are two lovely characters. Kelly, of course, and that we know as a friend of this podcast. She joined us live in Sheffield, didn't she, on Talking Snooker in the spring of 2021. We dashed away, didn't we? It was the rain, wasn't it? We were sheltering, running here, there, like the Keystone Cops. Eventually, we found ourselves in the museum. Another moment of this podcast, quite trademark, really. But we always love to hear from Kelly and Scott, who also comes across as a top snooker person. I've been chatting away with Scott for years now on Facebook. I always enjoy doing so. So, all the best to both those podcasts, Phil. There's so much to listen to these days. I mean, obviously we're the best, but the rest, they're all okay as well, aren't they? Of course they are. They're all pretty good.
Yeah, no, really good. Yeah, it's brilliant. There's such a wide range of options in the snooker podcasting world. Yeah, and these are two more really, really great options. I was trying to think of another word for options, but it's getting late. But yeah, they're two great pods. Join the pantheon of snooker pods that are out to listen to now. So yeah, get involved. Fill your week with snooker podcasts. You can nearly do it now.
I would say so. Yeah, we must sign off soon, mustn't we? It is getting late right here, later this Tuesday night here in the UK for us as we're chatting away. I also want to say a shout out to the journalist Nigel Slater for the relaunch of his snooker chat website. It's a really good resource. It's a proper collection of news and features on there. And it includes an interview with some guy called Nick Metcalf, who I think is a journalist. Quite surprised by how much gravitas he has, actually, Nick, when you read about him in print. Surprising amount. Being silly, of course, as per usual. I have talked to Nigel at length about my 2 decades covering snooker, and he's been kind enough to put up a piece where I reflect on the success of this podcast. And all being well, there'll be another piece at some stage about radio snooker. So I'm really grateful to Nigel for that. And it's a top site. We do wish Nigel well. And again, it's a bit different to the others. It's focusing more on those sort of news lines, those sort of chat lines that you get. People chat about the game. It's well named. I think he's good at. I think he's a good journalist, Nigel. Good at spotting those sort of lines that go out. Because I was thinking, again, there are some great websites out there. The likes of Snooker HQ, which has been around, of course, for a long, long time with our friend with our friend David Caulfield, friend of the pod. Forget my names right here. And Totally Snooker, the newest service, with another friend of the pod, Michael Day. They're both great news services. But again, this offers something a bit different, Snooker Chat. So good to see another strong service out there. And what else to say, Phil? Other sporting matters, perhaps. I'm off to Arsenal, Manchester United tomorrow night. Looking forward to it. Meanwhile, Liverpool go marching on. Their 2-0 win over Manchester City means they're now 9 points ahead of Arsenal and Chelsea at the top and 11 ahead of City. City having a really funny old sticky patch. And I should ask you about Barnsley. Sorry, how are they getting on?
Oh, you don't have to ask about that, to be fair. We got knocked out of the FA Cup on penalties by Bristol Rovers after a 0-0 draw. So, yeah, not good stuff. But yeah, now there's one more snooker line that I'd just been looking at on my phone as we were recording. And we should say thanks to Taylor Wilson for coming on last time we were on. And that reminded me of this because he put on a pro-am at Barrett's in Northampton with dual bits. I think it was 3 grand the winner. So nice little prize, and there were some good names involved there. Bingham was playing, Gary Wilson was playing, and I was just checking on Instagram there, and Joe O'Connor won it, beating Jamie Jones in the final. So nice little boost there, but that looked like a good event. I think he was streaming it live on TikTok. So yeah, I mean, he was telling us all about his different sort of ways of promoting and moving forward in the business, and that looks like an interesting avenue he's pursuing there. So well done to Joe for winning the thing.
Absolutely well done. And I saw Taylor in New York. I was very happy to do so. Well reminded. He was a very interesting guest indeed. We had quite a bit of compliments about that. And I'm looking through, and that's why I'm killing time. Was it Heathcote? I can't quite find it. It was Heathcote, wasn't it? I thought it was, but I didn't want to make a mistake. They signed up Louis Heathcote.
Yes, yeah.
He did mention about another player that he might be looking at, and it's obviously Louis, another friend of the podcast. Is anyone in snooker not a friend of this? Rob Francis is not quite a friend yet, is he? But very nearly, very, very strong acquaintance. As close to a friend as any person could be in a way. Um, I didn't mean it, but I didn't know about Barnsley. I feel really bad now how they're getting on just after they knocked out the cup. I didn't have a clue about that, so that wasn't just me. That wasn't
Oh no, it's fine. It's just same old garbage, isn't it?
same old garbage. What a line. What else has happened? England won the first test in New Zealand. Max Verstappen has clinched his fourth successive F1 world title, and the great Rafael Nadal has retired from tennis. What a career! What a titan of sport. 22 men's Grand Slam titles, including 14 times a French Open champion on the clay of Roland Garros. We, of course, wish Rafa well in his retirement. And you know what else I was thinking, Phil? The World Darts Championship gets ever closer. We've had the draw, haven't we? You must be getting pretty excited as Ali Pali approaches. I must admit, I am. I can't wait for it. I mean, loads of different angles. I can't wait to see how Luke Littler gets on. I know people say, oh, stop being obsessed with Littler, but I'm sorry, I just can't wait to see. He didn't quite do it last time, which is often forgotten. Luke Humphreys did. Can Littler get the job done this time?
Yeah, no, it's great. I mean, yeah, it's sort of one of those things where people it almost becomes unfashionable to just be interested in the main thing. But yeah, it's the main story. It was the main story last time, and obviously Humphreys is also an absolutely enormous story. So, yeah, it's interesting. They're obviously the two big favourites, but they're in the same side of the draw, so it'll be a semi-final between them, if all goes to plan, which it may well not. Littler is absolutely incredible, but he has lost in the first round of a few majors this year, so he's not unbeatable, as no one is. But yeah, uh, someone's going to come through the other half who people aren't really fancying at all to win, and may well play one of the two Lukes, but they'll be in a final and with a chance. So yeah, it's going to be fascinating. It lasts forever, doesn't it? It's the
Wow.
whole of Christmas, and I'm not complaining. One thing about the draw is the draw is always interesting, but the way they do it with those preliminary rounds, so it's a lot of either ors. It's not quite a sort of it's the opposite of sort of the Masters draw where it's all blockbuster stuff, but that is a minor complaint. But no, it's going to be great. And talking about viewing figures, that always does extremely well. Last year was
Oh.
absurdly good for them, so they'll be hoping for much more of the same.
I think it was nearly 4 million for the final. I think it was their biggest ever non-football audience. It was
Yeah.
extraordinary interest, mind-blowing interest across the country here in the UK. And it feels like you nicely teamed me up there, but only by chance about the length. I spoke to Rob Moore, another colleague of ours that you'll know so well as well, and he does virtually the whole tournament actually for the Sun newspaper. And we get my numbers right. I think it's now 16 days of darts, but across 20 because of the gaps at Christmas. I think they don't play Christmas Day, Boxing Day, and New Year's Day, maybe the 27th as well. There's one other day they don't play. Um, would it? No, it would be New Year's Day. They do play. New Year's Eve they don't play. Sorry, something like that, isn't it?
I think they might not play New Year's Eve or New Year's Day now.
Oh,
Because it used to
okay.
finish on New Year's Day, didn't it? But it's moved. I
Oh,
can't remember
I
exactly.
thought it might play first, second, or third. But okay, it's now going to be. I say now from the 26th tournament onwards. 20 days of darts across 24. And Rob was making the point that that is monstrous. They're adding more players, aren't they? So now you'd have to have 7 matches won to win the tournament. They're making it a neater number. Rob was making the point. I don't think I'm betraying an enormous confidence here, saying that It's an amazing success story, the World Darts Championship. Absolutely prolific, but got to be a bit careful. You don't want to dilute it too much. And he was sort of saying that maybe some of those days now might not be as strong as they could be. We'll see. But yeah, what a tournament, as you say. It's going to get even bigger next year. But yeah, it'll dominate our Christmas and New Year viewing. We just can't wait for it. But yeah, I mean, even bigger in 26, Phil. Even more days for you to write about.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's not necessarily great. I mean, there's already a lot of players in that tournament who have got sort of no hope of winning it, and it'll just be more of them. But I mean, they sell so many tickets. They find it so easy to sell the tickets, and they're selling it, especially before Christmas, to an audience who don't care who they're watching. They won't even really be watching the darts at all.
Yeah.
So they could put anyone in there really, and they'll sell it out. So they're going to take advantage of it. But yeah, it won't be much you won't be adding loads of great darts necessarily, but they'll be making a lot of money. So, fair enough.
Yes, it is all about money. You're absolutely right to say that. They're selling so many tickets now. They just want to get an extra 4 days ticket money coming in. Right. Should we go? I know there's much more to say. Well done to Judd Trump. Brilliant UK Championship. Enjoy the shootout, everybody, coming up over the next 4 days in Leicester. And then, of course, next week, the Scottish Opens, the action coming thick and fast. We'll be back with you soon here on Talking Snooker, probably, as I say, in the early stages of the Scottish Open. We do intend to catch up with your correspondence. We have got quite a lot of it in. If you want to add yours to the pile, talkingsnooker@yahoo.com or tweet us at Talking Snooker. Phil, let's finish by reflecting again on the life and times of Terry Griffiths. He will be remembered as long as we're all around and far beyond. Former world champion, former UK champion, former Masters champion, prolific coach, fine television commentator, just a very special character in the history of snooker. And whenever we gather, people long in the future gather. I'll talk about Terry, won't they? Because he was such a likable character, such a lovely and pleasant man in so many ways, and just what a champion. I mean, so many triumphs. His greatest, of course, at the Crucible in '79, and just what a career. So sad to have lost him, but we got all those memories, haven't we?
Yeah, I mean, generally, if he if he'd done any of his three careers, as in player, coach, commentator, he'd go down as a great in any three of those. He generally was. I've never really ordered this, but one of my favorite commentators, if not my favorite. Always loved hearing him being on. It was very sad when he stopped doing that. Regarded as arguably the greatest coach ever. And he's not right at the very top elite level of player ever, but he completed the Triple Crown. How many people have done that? Not too many. So, he's achieved monumental things in all three strands of his snooker life, and more importantly than all that, just widely, the consensus is an absolute delight of a person. So, yeah, congratulations on an incredible life to Terry, and he'll be badly missed.
Yeah, rest in peace, Terry. And thanks for giving us so many wonderful snooker memories throughout your profound long time, your decades in this sport. That's it for Talking Snooker. I'll see you next time, Phil. Enjoy the shootout. No doubt we'll be swapping messages during it. And we might see Dominic Dale singing, by the way. One day when I was there, I came out the press room and I could see a big commotion. It was Dominic making everyone laugh, just doing on the air with Rachel Casey, doing ridiculous things and chatting away. And then, out of nothing, started singing White Christmas. And I don't know if you, and I was just laughing to myself about it so much in the time since, because it's funny anyway to see Dominic Dale sing White Christmas, but he doesn't sort of start it in a sort of low key way and get bigger. It's massive from the word go. It's I'm dreaming, and the hands are everywhere, and it's like he's at the opera, and it's just brilliant. I mean, we have some characters in this sport, but if that guy's not top three, I want to know who's beating him.
Yeah, for sure. And if his retirement is as certain as it sounds like it's going to be, don't let him get off the telly when he hangs at the queue. I'm sure he'll be around in the sport regardless. On the shootout, I was having a look for. I always like to have a random pick, not random, at least an educated guess. So my pick is Jackson Page this year. Just getting it
Wow.
out there. If it does come in, I'll look like a genius.
You will. If it comes in, you'll talk about it non-stop. If it doesn't, you'll never mention it again, will you?
Yeah, we're so far into this episode, no one will be listening now anyway, so I can't lose.
I doubt there'll be anyone out there still with us. I have to say, we are talking to ourselves. Now, that's okay. See you next time, sir.
You will. Pleasure as always.
I salute you at this late hour, which is not totally pointless now because we are, of course, on YouTube as well as our usual audio platforms. And we appreciate you joining us for this very long episode where we pay tribute to the great Terry Griffiths and, of course, talk through various matters on the table. Loads going on in snooker. And as ever, we're glad to share this season with you. From you old friends, Phil Haig and Nick Metcalf, cheerio.